Hello everyone, welcome back. Today is what, day 4 for our core Java, isn't that correct? And yesterday, if I'm not wrong, we looked at on the previous session if statement and also very briefly for loop. Let's take a look at from our Eclipse standpoint, we'll get good clarity. So there we go with an if statement. Everyone with me, team? So the first and foremost important thing for us is to understand that if statement helps us more as a condition, and the for loop is helping us more through repeat certain steps. So anytime in an if condition, our simplest approach is the output of that specific result that we're looking at. Whatever condition is there, that is what we're putting into the if state. Now, let's say that so here we've still not come to a team fully. We were just still getting into it. I want to talk about one more if statement as an example, so it gives us a little bit comfort. If statement 2, let's talk about weekend. So this is a very simple program, team. I'm going to talk about how it works. And I want you all to start enjoying what these programs can do going forward. That's what would slowly give us that interest. Oh, you know what? Let's try this. Let's try that. Okay, so here is what I require to do. The requirement is to see if today is a weekday or not. So team, there are multiple things that we can do. We can actually look at the system date or take the input from the user and so on. But what we are doing is we will do something called as hard code the date, just as a concept, and we will advance this code more as we go forward. So we're looking at more like a version 1 of as a solution for this requirement. So what do I mean? I have something called as a day. So I'll say string, there is a variable day, and I want to put some value into it. Let us say that I'm going to put Monday. Okay, that's the input for me. And I know that it's not a weekend as a day. So I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. These are the multiple options that I can take. Everything that we are doing and each thing, as I said, will keep repeating. I want you to all also have multiple practice with the same things. What is critical is how we slowly approach the logic itself. So here my condition is very simple. So I'll say if day equals Monday. Now this is where I'm comparing if this matches to me. Okay? Then I'll say it's a weekday. Now I need how many such options, team? Think of it like that. So how did a simple if statement work? If you remember, all of you, only line 8 or line 11 will get executed. Why? Because if the condition is true, it will go into this first block, which is under if. It's false, it will go into the second block into the else. In our case, what we are doing is I'm saying my variable if it is Monday, then I'll do this. Now I have 7 such data points to compare against team, correct? So if I say else, then I cannot just print and say weekend. Why? Let's try and execute and see how this code will work out for us. That becomes important. Error exists in project. Overall in the project, in the for loop, there's an error team. There's no error right now in the J09. So I get saying that it's a weekday. Great. Now I change it to Tuesday and I run it. And I get it because it's a weekend. Now, is Tuesday really a weekend team? Did our requirement get satisfied by this logic? Tuesday is not a weekend. So then I have a challenge. A challenge where I would have to say, okay, so this code is a little weak. I'm going to do a bulk comment. You see what I'm trying to do, everyone? Slowly the logic has to come to me in such a way that it should work first. So let's say if I do something like this. If day is Monday, then this, then I will do something very simple, team, everywhere. Look at this. I'll copy this and I'll say if it's Tuesday, then it is a weekday. Let me put it a few more times. Change. Wednesday, weekday. Thursday, weekday. Friday, weekday. Saturday, weekend. It's in fact, isn't it surprising that these days, for us weekdays, weekends are almost the same, with everyone's trying to stay at home. But it's good at least from a perspective of a programming and an assignment team. So now look at my logic of the code. What you're building is the logic team. I have so many statements. My code is long, may not be the most efficient, may not be the best solution. But does it work or not is what is critical first. See, look at the number of if conditions that I put. Primarily, there are 5 conditions to say it's a weekday. And there are 2 conditions to say it's a weekend. This is for the weekend conditions. And here are my weekday conditions. Conditions are if conditions, basically. So now let's test our code team. Each time we're creating this, we're also testing. Let's see what's the issue with for loop and try and correct this. This is basically J. We're going to come to this in a few minutes, team. It's J plus 1. It's J here. Oops, where did I say J? J here. That is, the errors in the code would disappear. I can always try and say, check that box that gives warning team. I don't like to keep errors in the project as much as I can, so avoid it. So see if it's a Tuesday, it's a weekday. Let's try a Saturday and run this code again. And that works for one of these days. So I have 7 data points to check this team. So if I change this to Sunday and then rerun it, so that's the actual execution. I wanted to show you this entire thing, but it's basically gone, skipped the lines. It's talking about where all it's done. But for Sunday, it's giving us a weekend team. And let's say I change it to a Thursday now. And we do a return execution. And it tells me weekday. So looks like my program works good, team. But the only challenge is it efficient enough? So when we see this program, it's just got a bunch of if conditions combined into it, where I have if, and there's literally nothing like an else in this statement. But I'm saying if it is this, do this. If it is this, do this. Else, it doesn't say anything. So now let's talk about the a little bit better version of this whole thing. So I'm going to combine this whole block as well again and create another version, hopefully, which is more efficient. It's almost going to be the same. So I'm going to copy the content so we don't have to recreate it. And I'm going to combine all the if statements into one. See how I'm going to do this. So if or this will be awesome. Code. See, as and when your code becomes horizontal, I was telling you the other day, it becomes not that easy to manage. So now what I'm doing is I'm combining this into a condition where if it is equal to either of this, I'm fine. And these conditions are separated by these two vertical bars. You'll find it right above the enter keyword on your keyboard. And that basically says if it is either of these conditions being true, then I will print a weekday. And I have all the conditions, the 5 into it. On the contrary, if it is a Saturday or a Sunday, then I have a different one. See, there seems to be an error here. Would you be able to identify, team, what the error could be on line 48? And I strongly recommend that you start putting focus on these aspects, team, because it will be something that will continuously ask you to say, okay, what's wrong here? What's wrong here? Your eyes should be able to debug, team, before you take the help of IDE. I got all answers. Thank you, team. This is brilliant. Great job, everyone. So we primarily are missing the closing bracket here. And you also know where it is pointing to it. You have an open bracket, I need a closing bracket. So let's add that and see. It is syntax wise looks to be okay. I'll save it. No errors, so that's good. So now my intent was to take all these lines of code from 19 to 43, almost like 22 lines, and put that into 4 or 5 lines. See, I'm changing the size of the code. It may not necessarily be faster, team. The code size changes, definitely. It says it's a weekday, depending on what we are entering. And whenever you create your programs and tests, make sure you're testing it correctly. So the iteration is going through that execution. Let's debug and see how this happens. Debug is the other important feature I will talk about briefly today. debugging basics, more like part 1, and we get time, we'll also continue to work on for loop. Okay, let's see. So what is debugging? When I do a regular run, it will go through that entire execution team. But when I do a debug run, it will go line by line. Now, for example, I comment this code and I uncomment this, the longer version that we had earlier. Okay. Now, I could go on an execution starting with saying that, hey, you know what? On line 9, when I put value into the variable called vday, stop this. This is only the first time we are looking at what is called debugging. As we keep using it, we will get more and more idea. The intent is to watch what is happening, team, for us. Okay. So good point right now to be able to get there. So I will right click here and say something called a toggle breakpoint. Do you notice this, everyone? This toggle breakpoint basically tells the code that at this point, take a stop sign, look around, see what I want to do, and then proceed further with the execution. If I hit a regular run, it is doing start to end all by itself. Now I put a breakpoint on line 9. At this point, if I do a regular run team, it would not capture any breakpoints. It would go about the entire execution. Sorry. So what we do is we need to do this debug run. So this icon that you see with the bug on it is the mode in which we will execute. A lot of features in Eclipse, we're going through them one after the other, slowly learning how and when we can use them. Debug, as the word says, helps us to identify and see how the program is going through and be able to take away any bugs that we can find. I'm going to hit it on debug mode. So now, this is allow access team. That's because you're controlling the system as a programmer now. This is one of the first screens that pop-up will appear, team. That is confirm perspective switch. What it is trying to say is in a regular Java development and execution, your windows frames like packages here, code here, console, everything here looks okay. But in a debug mode, I can show a different perspective. When I say switch to that mode, you'll see the whole window changing, the style of it. Actually, I think this is more custom to my settings already. Can you all try and do the same at your end so far? This couple of lines and say debug and show me how your screen looks, team. I would want to make you the presenter and be able to just peek in how your screens look. I'm still in the debug mode. I'm going to run through. If someone raises your hand, I can make you presenter in a quick bit, and then we can go through it as well. So team, back to my screen. If I can have all of your attention, I know you switched screens to maybe see that. See now, do you notice this small arrow that is there on line 9? It basically says that, hey, you know what? I'm ready to execute line 9. I'm not yet executed. So at this point, team, if you say resume, it will complete the entire test. If you say stop, it will stop the test at this point. If you say step into, it will keep going inside as long as the functions to call and so on. Step over will basically execute the step, but it will not go inside anything that's calling. So what we're going to use is step into team. Observe to this variable section. The other day when we started with, we were talking variables. So as I execute step 9, observe what happens to this side of it. So did you notice that a new variable with the name vday is created and the value is sun, S-U-N, with double quotes in it. It gives a lot of identifications, team IDs of variables as it keeps going. You can ignore that. But if you kind of expand it, it'll show you, how it holds the information and so on. What is critical for us is what VDay has for us at any point in time. Now, see, it has come to line 20, team, and this is the first comparison. If it is true, it'll go to line 21. So let's see. It's not true. So it's gone to line 23 straight away. Is that true? No, it's Sunday, right? So it's not true, not true, not true. Until it finds the option where it is true, then it comes inside that if statement. And the execution then gets terminated, completed. Now, if I change this to Monday and I execute it, what would happen, team? So, oops, I see if I don't do a debug run, it'll execute everything without stop, team. So hit on the debug run. So if there's a breakpoint at that time, it would stop. At this point, nothing, no variable created. Step into variable created, value in here. Weekday conditions, ting, weekday. So is this true? Yes, this is true. So what does that mean? So step into, it'll come, execute that. Every other statement is no longer true. But it'll still do all these comparisons. It has to compare everything and come out. It works fine, but it does that comparison. So that is how we do the overall debug mode executions, team. Now, that was our old code. Let's look at the same code in a debug mode execution when we're doing it for this version. Okay, there we go. So it's the same code, team. I mean, logic wise, but oops. Okay, yeah. I think I still have the debug point set here. So if the debugging point, breakpoint, I'd set it on line 13 or something here, which is commented, it will never hit that key. So consider breakpoint as something where you ask in like a stop sign. Hey, stop here and look at or see what I'm doing. 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, so where am I? I'm here on the line 9. So I'll just step into. Every other line is commented. Now see, I only have two if statements. So it's already executed line 45, which is happening to be true. And then it's kind of good with that. There's a combinations that we can do, team improvements to make it more and more user friendly as a program. But our intent right now is more towards learning these fundamentals. So let's go back to our Java perspective. So this was the debug perspective. Do you see these icons that I'm showing on the top right? So that's the debug perspective, in which this is how the screen would look. If I check back on the Java perspective, I'll get back to all my package, project, under that, the regular files and so on. Okay. Any questions, anyone so far? Are you all able to catch up with what we were doing? Now I want to play with more with the for loop and a little bit more on the debugging. It's interesting now. If no questions, I'll move on. If you have questions, please let me know. We can also look at your screen to identify issues. All right. So team, I'm starting with a new Java class, and I'm going to call this as J10 for loop 2. The first one was very simple and didn't really have much. So I'm going to take this underscores allowed. It's a finish. Everyone. All right. We talk about for loops team. So the concept of for was very simple, like I was mentioning. Let's redo this. When I say for integer I don't need to define an integer I or anything here. I can always define it outside. Once I define it, I don't need to redefine it. I'll say where it starts from. Let's say I count starts from 1 and I will go till it is less than 100, and each time I will have I incremented by I equals I plus 1. Now the same logic that I'm saying I equals to I plus 1, let us say if I have an int j, okay, and I print j equals to, let's say, 22, and I print the value of j, and next I print the value of j plus plus t. So whenever I say j plus plus, it actually increments the value of j by 1. So whatever value we gave, it'll add to it. Let's see how this works. So, the most important one. It just incremented j, but it never printed that value out for us. If I say j equals to j plus 1 team and print the value of j here, it's basically incrementing it. The same thing can be done just by saying j plus plus. So in this case also the increment is done without having to use, so it's more like a shortcut. So in my for loop, I could use the same logic, and instead of saying I equals to I plus 1, I could straight away say I plus plus. Now, if I do any action in here, it will repeat those number of times. How many number of times would this repeat team? If I say I'll print A, how many times would this code A get repeated in this case? I can't count it. But then if I say something like plus I, we would be able to notice. But what would you guess, team? Our guess should be based on where it's starting and where it's going to end. Starting is I equals to 1 and I is less than or equal to 100. So here, let's say this is how I'm doing it. And now I rerun this code. And that's where, it stops at 99 because 100 is not less than 100. It is equal to. The other option is if I say less than or equal to and then rerun this, you would then notice that it will also accommodate the condition where I is equal to 100, but it cannot be greater than. So it is about the conditions that we can play in this team. So let us say that I put a breakpoint where I'll put a breakpoint here on line 7. Now tell me, team, by this point, by line 7, if I do a debug run, would j have the value already into it? Would it get created as a variable? I and j, would they get created as variables? And would they have values in them? And I want you to think that way, team, before each time you try and just execute the code. Okay, because we learned something, let us apply it. So I put a breakpoint, right clicking and saying toggle breakpoint here. And now I'm doing a debug run. So at this point, both variables should be created, but only j should be having the value. I is created, I does not have any value into it yet, and that's why I don't see it any memory allocated for it. In this case, by now J has value into it. I does not have anything into it. Now, if I go step into each of these, you'll see the value of J changing, didn't you? And we're printing, there's nothing that you'll see changing here. Now observe what happens on line 10. So your eyes started with 1. You go into the for loop, come back, redo it, go into the for loop, then keep doing it, go into the for loop, and repeat this process 100 times. And the power of programming is if it is 100 or 1,000, it does not take, like forever to do these steps. These are pretty fast. Yes, I wouldn't run for 1 million or 1 billion, so many things, team. At least look at 10,000 records, how quickly it could do. So that's how we basically are looking at both if and for loops, team. Any questions so far on this part? I'm assuming no. Let's continue with one more. Let's do another exercise, team. I'm going to take a new one, J11, and I want to create, let's say, a multiplication table. So what's the multiplication table? Let's talk about the purpose. Always choose hyphen. So the purpose or requirement, what we have is given a number, print all multiples till 20 times. That's my simple requirement. Now, how do I do this thing? So think of the logic, team. The logic is I'm expected output. That's where we will get smarter to look at what we want, and then we can decide. Will be something like, let's say it is multiplication table of something easy for me, 12. So I'll say 12 star 1 equals to 12. Then in another line I'll tell 12 star 2 equals to 24, and all the way till 12 star 20 equals to 40. So this is the expected output for me. So how do we go about approaching it, team? I want to show you a few examples like these myself, and I want you to take home some and try as well. So in this case, now let us say, whatever I want to do. Okay. The most important thing is there are two numbers for us, team. First is an integer that we're taking as the base number, I'll say enum. And there's another integer called b times, and that will go up to 20. Correct? Now, what is it that I want to do? I have another integer now called not b times, base times. Okay, that's fine. Let's say it's output t. Its output is nothing yet. So basically, each time I need to print the statement. How do I print it? The print should be something like bnum plus, see how I'm giving t, star plus whatever variable I'll get. So let's say I equals to 1 to begin with, plus equal to, I can't give, that has to come in the, look at the output team. Any variable without double quotes plus any constant text is in double quotes, then plus another variable. I is not created here as per it, so I'll say int I starting with 1 equals plus bnum star I. Or bnum, I didn't give any value. So let's say in this case, I'm doing a multiplication table of 12. So if I just print this, it will print it. That's great. It will print it one time for me, hopefully. I don't know. X is 12 into 1 is 12. But I need this to get printed 20 times. So how do I do it? For int, but I is already defined. I equals to 1, let us say. Let's do the definition here itself. Why do I need another line for it? For int I equals to 1. In this case, I is less than b times. Because I may change that value and see the power of the outputs when we get it. And I plus plus. Now when I do this, what is happening is each time it will print this, repeat this. My number 12 will be constant. I will change from 1 to 20, I guess, or 19 in this case, I believe. And then the result will be a multiplication of it. Let us see what comes out. So I get it, like I said, 12 times till 19. And now make it till 20, also less than or equal to t. So that way it would work perfectly till that point. So now look at the power of programming and what we could put into it, everyone. Like I could change this and say, now you know what, I want a 13 table, but not till 20, till 40. Will it print that for me? I don't know. So there we go. So 13 times 40 being 520 all the way, starting from 13 times 1. So these give us the power of programming team, power on how we can do a lot of calculations and data manipulations in a quick time. So that gives us also a good practice on how things like a for loop will work. Now, let's assume things like, I don't want to give you like palindromes and a few things like Fibonacci series and all that yet. We'll do that in the next session, team. But let's say I want to do something like this. All right, team. So I'm talking about printing a tree that looks, how do I say? Okay, let me show you. Require output display as, so Christmas tree. this way. Now, how can we get this printed in our code? I want you all to give this a try. This would be a good assignment to think about. Now, the logic is very simple. I'll have two numbers. You can have, do you want to try it, team? How this works? As an exercise, try and show this to me tomorrow. I'll keep this as is. And so you can please try and look at it once. And if it's not coming through, we will discuss. Let me show you another concept while we do this as a concept of what it is. We will apply that later. For this exercise of printed tree, I think just the for loops is enough for us. Let's learn also about how a while loop works. Why it comes into play with examples I'll do more tomorrow. We're going to do some banking assignments tomorrow that will help us get some good idea. So team, if statement executes one time based on condition, correct? I'm losing power as well. Let me see if I have 3 minutes, that's good enough. For loop repeats certain steps, certain number of times, but while loop repeats till condition is met. That like if plus for together. So what does that mean? Let us say int I equals 10t. Now, if I say while I is less than, or rather I is greater than 0, and I'm going to print the value of I each time. Now, what will happen, team? Can you tell me, anyone, how many times this will get printed? Just a guess, maybe. Everyone, how many times would this get printed? So answer 1, 10, 9, 0 are incorrect. This will get printed infinite number of times. There is no end to it. Why? You'll notice, and I'll kind of explain that to you. Do you see that, team? I'm printing I, and each time the way it is working is very simple. Let's do a debug run. It will be easy for us to also look deeper now. You're all understanding how debug is being done, team? I put a right click, put a breakpoint, and hitting this ant icon to debug. I'll hit the breakpoint, I'll switch my perspective. Did anyone lose my audio, team? Everything okay? So I've hit the debug point and breakpoint. I've not have any values of I yet. It created with assignment of 10. Now look at the condition while I is greater than 10, greater than 0, sorry. And in this case, while is a keyword which basically says, well, the condition is true, keep on repeating the same process. And if I say step into, it will come printed. Then it will go back again to compare next time. You'll see what is the value of I. The value of I is not changing, team. So hence, it will get into this loop infinitely. So what that means is you have to have a way inside your loop saying that, hey, you know what, that value will change sometime and it will meet the criteria. So now I'm incrementing I. Will it print it out, team? Will it print it out as we expect now, 10 statements? Actually, no, because now each time it'll keep printing and adding to I the value of 1. And that's at the rate it will keep going now until you stop. I think it's almost printed 500,000 now. Why I'm going in the wrong direction, team? I'm starting with 10, going down to 0. So I should be counting down. And now this time you know that you'll do it for a certain number of times. So if I have a for loop and I know that, okay, this is going to be done, then why do I need to use a while loop? It will come more into while, I'll say something like Boolean user login status. Okay. And if SU login status equals to true, I'll explain a little bit more in depth here, team, tomorrow. While you login status, oopsie, I will keep printing. Oops. User is logged in. We can do whatever we want. Let me get back to the Java perspective. And once it's done, I'll say out here, user logged out. As long as the user logged in, I can do a bunch of things. Here, the value can be only true or false. That's a Boolean variable. And that is what we can put into a condition. The result of a condition anytime is the keyword called TRUV or false. And this highlighted thing gets always replaced with a true or a false there, team. So team, try that tree exercise. I'll also put it into the Skype group. And if there are no questions, I'll see you tomorrow. Practice and let me know if there are questions. Ready to share your screen and we'll continue further. Okay, great team. We'll see you all tomorrow then. All the best. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye then.